Every evening, the rejected Omega carried half of her own dinner into the frozen forest and left it beneath the same old pine tree. She never expected the little wolf pup to thank her. She never expected it to remember her. And she certainly never expected that one night, the pup would disappear without leaving a single paw print behind. But the next morning, Elara opened her cabin door and froze. 4 enormous black wolves were standing silently in the snow. They didn't growl. They didn't attack. They simply stared at her as if they had crossed the mountains for one reason: to find her. One of them slowly stepped forward and dropped something at her feet. A torn piece of the blanket she had once wrapped around the starving pup. Elara's heart sank. Where is he? The largest wolf raised his head toward the forest. Then he turned and began walking. Elara followed. She had no idea that beneath the trees, something far more dangerous than wolves was waiting. She had no idea that the little creature she had fed every night was connected to an ancient royal bloodline. And she had absolutely no idea that the largest black wolf leading her into the darkness was not a wolf at all, but the Alpha King. A king who had spent weeks searching for the pup. A king who would soon discover that the woman everyone in the village had rejected was the only person his family could trust. But before Elara could learn the truth, she would have to survive the storm, the betrayal, and the man who wanted the little wolf dead. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness can awaken a destiny powerful enough to change an entire kingdom. Every evening, when the last light disappeared behind the northern mountains, Elara carried half of her supper into the forest. She never told anyone why. There were no witnesses when she crossed the edge of the village with her old wool cloak pulled tightly around her shoulders. No one saw the small wooden bowl tucked beneath her arm, or the way she sometimes stopped to listen before continuing through the snow. The village of Thornmere had learned to ignore Elara years ago. That was almost worse than hatred. People stepped aside when she passed. Children were warned not to speak to her. Hunters left bundles of torn clothing outside her door instead of knocking. Even the village baker sometimes charged her more than the others because, as he once coldly explained, rejected Omegas should be grateful for anything. Elara had learned not to answer. 3 winters had passed since her former pack had cast her out. 3 winters since the alpha she had loved had stood before the entire pack and severed their bond. She remembered the silence more than his words. She remembered the way everyone looked at the floor. No one defended her. No one stepped forward. And when she walked away beneath a grey winter sky, she carried only a worn cloak, a small knife, a handful of herbs, and the strange certainty that if she allowed herself to become cruel, the people who had hurt her would have won twice. So she chose another way. She lived alone in a cabin beyond the northern edge of Thornmere, where the forest began and the mountains rose like dark walls against the sky. The cabin was small enough that she could cross it in 6 steps. A narrow bed stood beside the stone fireplace. Shelves held dried herbs, jars of honey, bundles of thread, and pieces of cloth waiting to be repaired. A copper kettle hung above the fire, blackened from years of use. It was not much, but it was hers. And every evening, she shared what little she had. That was how she found the pup. The sun had already vanished behind the trees when Elara heard the sound. Not a howl. Not a growl. A tiny, broken whimper. She stopped beneath the pines. Snow drifted silently through the branches. Hello. Nothing. Then another whimper came from beneath a fallen tree. Elara lowered her lantern. At first she saw only snow. Then 2 pale eyes opened in the darkness. A wolf pup stared back at her. It was tiny. Its fur was white-grey, dirty from mud and frost, with one hind leg trapped beneath a branch. Snow had gathered across its back. Its ribs moved rapidly beneath its thin coat. Elara slowly crouched. The pup pressed itself against the frozen ground. I won't hurt you. The animal bared tiny teeth. Elara smiled sadly. I know. You don't have to trust me. She set down the lantern. Then she removed her cloak. The cold immediately struck through her dress, but she wrapped the cloak around the pup instead. It trembled beneath the wool. Elara carefully lifted the branch. The pup cried out. She froze. I'm sorry. Her hands shook as she freed the little leg. The pup tried to crawl away, but its strength failed after only a few inches. Elara watched it collapse. Then she looked toward the village. It was too far. The pup would never survive the night. So she carried it home. She cleaned the wound. She warmed broth. She placed the little animal beside the fire and waited. The pup did not eat. Elara stayed awake until midnight. The next morning, it was gone. Only a few tiny paw prints remained near the door. Elara stood there for a long moment. Then she smiled. Good. She returned inside. That evening, she made the same broth again. She carried it beneath the pine. She placed the bowl beside the tree. And she walked away. The next morning, the bowl was empty. That became their secret. Every evening, Elara left food beneath the same pine. Sometimes it was broth. Sometimes rabbit. Sometimes nothing more than a piece of bread soaked in warm milk. Whenever she had little, she gave the pup half. Whenever she had almost nothing, she still gave something. Weeks passed. The pup began waiting for her. At first it remained beneath the trees. Then it came closer. Then it followed her. Soon, when Elara returned from the village, she would see two pale eyes watching from behind the fence. She never tried to touch it. She simply sat on the cabin steps. The pup would lie several feet away. They would watch the snow together. There were evenings when Elara spoke to it. Not because she expected an answer. Because silence could become very heavy when a person carried it alone. You know, she whispered one night, I used to think being rejected meant something was wrong with me. The pup lifted its head. Elara smiled. But perhaps some door's close because we're meant to find another one. The pup blinked. She laughed softly. That sounded wiser in my head.
For the first time, the little wolf crept closer. Elara did not move. It stopped beside her boot. Then, very carefully, it rested its chin on the edge of her cloak. Elara's eyes filled with tears. She looked toward the dark forest. Thank you. The pup stayed until dawn. It became the one living creature in Elara's world that never asked what she had been before. It did not care that she was an Omega. It did not care that she had no pack. It only came when she opened the door. Then one evening, everything changed. Elara returned later than usual. The wind was rising. Snow whipped between the trees. She carried a small bundle of meat beneath her cloak. She reached the pine. The pup was not there. She waited. Nothing. She called softly. Nothing answered. She searched beneath the tree. No paw prints. No fur. No blood. Nothing. Elara stood alone beneath the falling snow, holding the little bundle in her hands. For reasons she could not explain, her chest tightened. She looked toward the forest. Where did you go? Only the wind answered. And somewhere far beyond the trees, something enormous moved through the darkness. Elara told herself the pup had gone home. That was the kind explanation. Perhaps its mother had found it. Perhaps a pack had returned. Perhaps the little animal had finally remembered where it belonged. She repeated those thoughts while gathering herbs. She repeated them while repairing a hunter's coat. She repeated them while cooking supper. But when night came, she still placed a bowl beneath the pine. Then she waited. Nothing. The second night, she waited longer. Nothing. By the fifth night, she stopped carrying food. Not because she had stopped caring, because hope had begun to hurt. On the sixth morning, she woke before sunrise. Something had disturbed the silence. Elara sat upright. The fire had burned low. A faint scratching sound came from outside. She reached for her knife. Another sound followed. A slow breath. Then another. She approached the window. Her fingers pulled back the curtain. 4 wolves stood beyond the fence. Elara stopped breathing. They were enormous. Their black coats almost disappeared into the blue-gray morning. One stood in front. 3 remained behind him. Their bodies were scarred. One had a torn ear. Another carried an old wound across its shoulder. The largest was taller than any wolf Elara had ever seen. A faint silver streak crossed his chest. None of them moved. They simply stared at the cabin. At her. Elara's hand tightened around the knife. She slowly opened the door. Cold air rushed inside. The 4 wolves remained still. She stepped onto the porch. Go. The largest wolf lowered his head. Not in submission. Almost in greeting. Elara frowned. Then one of the wolves stepped forward. Something hung from its jaws. A strip of cloth. Elara recognized it immediately. It was from the blanket she had wrapped around the pup during its first night. Her face changed. Where did you get that? The wolf dropped the cloth. Elara descended the steps. The 4 wolves watched her approach. When she reached the cloth, she knelt. Her fingers trembled. The fabric smelled faintly of pine, smoke, and the animal she had come to love. The largest wolf gave a quiet sound. Not a growl. A low, urgent breath. Then he turned toward the forest. He looked back at her. Elara understood. You want me to follow you? The wolf waited. Something inside her told her to go. So she took her cloak. She locked the cabin and followed 4 enormous black wolves into the trees. She did not see the man watching from the ridge. Garrick had been returning from a hunt when he saw the wolves. He lowered his bow. For years, he had disliked Elara. He believed kindness was something people pretended to possess when they had no power. He had watched her survive alone and thought it foolish. Now, seeing 4 royal-looking wolves lead her into the forest, his eyes narrowed. There had always been stories about black wolves in the northern mountains. Old stories. Dangerous stories. Stories about creatures that guarded the bloodline of the Alpha Kings. Garrick had laughed at those stories. He wasn't laughing now. He followed. Deep beneath the trees, Elara struggled to keep pace. The wolves moved quickly, but every few minutes the largest one stopped and looked back, waiting, making sure she was still there. Snow reached her ankles, then her knees. The forest grew darker. Ancient pines blocked the morning light. At last, the wolves entered a narrow passage between 2 stone cliffs. Elara followed. Then she saw blood. Fresh blood. Her heart dropped. She ran. The wolves surrounded a ruined stone shrine. Inside lay the missing pup. Alive. Beside it was another black wolf. Wounded. Badly. Elara rushed forward. The pup recognized her. It stumbled toward her. She dropped to her knees. You. The little wolf pressed against her chest. For the first time since it had disappeared, Elara felt warmth return to her body. Then the largest black wolf stepped into the shrine. He looked at the pup, then at Elara. And slowly, impossibly, his body began to change. Elara stumbled backward. The creature before her rose on 2 legs. Black fur pulled away like smoke. Bones shifted. The air filled with the sound of movement that no human body should have made. Then the transformation ended. A man stood where the wolf had been. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and dressed in dark leather beneath a torn winter cloak. His black hair was wet with melting snow. A deep scar crossed one side of his chest. But it was his eyes that stopped Elara. They were the same eyes. Cold silver. The eyes of the wolf. The man looked at her for several seconds. Then he glanced toward the pup. You found him. His voice was low. Elara tightened her grip around the animal.
Who are you? The man stepped forward. The 3 wolves remained behind him. I am Kaelen. The name meant nothing to her. Then he said the rest. Alpha King of the Northern Kingdom. Elara stared. The title carried weight even beyond the mountains. She had heard stories of Kaelen, a king who rarely entered villages, a ruler whose warriors were said to be unmatched, a wolf king descended from a bloodline older than Thornmere itself. But the man standing before her did not look like a king. He looked exhausted. You've been looking for him, Elara whispered. Kaelen nodded. For weeks. The pup crawled against Elara's coat. Kaelen's expression softened. He is my nephew. Elara looked down. Then why was he alone? Kaelen's jaw tightened. My brother was murdered. Silence filled the shrine. Someone attacked our territory, he continued. The pup was taken during the chaos. We tracked him for days, but the trail disappeared near your village. Elara looked at the little wolf. I didn't know. I know. His eyes met hers. That's why the wolves came. Elara frowned. What do you mean? Kaelen crouched near the pup. He remembered you. The word struck deeper than she expected. He remembered your scent, your voice, the food, the nights beside your fire. Elara looked away. I only fed him. Kaelen shook his head. No, you gave him a reason to trust. The wounded wolf behind them shifted. Elara immediately moved toward it. Kaelen watched. You should rest. It will die if I don't treat this. She knelt beside the animal. The wound was deep. An arrow had entered near the shoulder and torn through muscle. Elara opened her herb pouch. Hold him still. Kaelen obeyed. The wolf growled as she cleaned the wound. Elara whispered to it. Easy. Her fingers moved carefully. She packed crushed herbs into the wound. The wolf slowly stopped resisting. Kaelen watched her hands. You are a healer. A little. Where did you learn? My mother. The answer came quietly. Kaelen said nothing. Elara finished the bandage. When she looked up, she found him staring at her. Not as though she were an Omega. Not as though she were weak. As though he were seeing her for the first time. Then the pup moved. Elara noticed a silver mark beneath its fur. A crescent shape. The same symbol carved into the stone wall. She stood. What's that? Kaelen turned. His face changed. He walked toward the wall. The ancient carving was nearly hidden beneath moss. A silver crescent surrounded by 4 black marks. Kaelen touched it. My ancestors. Elara looked between the symbol and the pup. What does it mean? Kaelen's voice became quieter. It means the bloodline survived. Before Elara could ask anything else, a branch snapped outside. The wolves turned. Kaelen's expression hardened. He smelled the air. Someone followed us. Elara's stomach tightened. A moment later, Garrick stepped from between the trees. He held a bow. Behind him stood armed men. Garrick smiled. Your Majesty. Kaelen's eyes became ice. Garrick pointed toward Elara. She was hiding the royal heir. Elara stared at him. You followed us. You led me to something valuable. Kaelen stepped forward. The wolves growled. Garrick lifted his bow. Don't. The entire forest seemed to stop breathing. Then the pup whimpered. Garrick looked toward it. And something greedy appeared in his eyes. By sunrise, Thornmere had become a place of fear. Garrick had returned before dawn. He had told the village council that Elara had secretly sheltered the Alpha King's missing heir. He told them she had planned everything. He told them she wanted power. And because Elara had no family name, no pack, and no one willing to stand beside her, people believed him. Soldiers surrounded her cabin. Elara watched them through the window. The 4 black wolves stood outside. Kaelen was among them. The pup slept beside the fireplace. A pounding sounded against the door. Elara. She closed her eyes. Then opened them. She stepped outside. Villagers gathered behind the soldiers. Some looked ashamed. Others looked afraid. Garrick stood near the front. You have been hiding a royal creature, he said. I didn't know what he was. No one believes you. Elara looked toward the wolves. Kaelen's body was tense. The soldiers had their hands on their weapons. One wrong movement could turn the village into a graveyard. Elara stepped forward. Let me speak to the king. Garrick laughed. You don't give orders here. Kaelen shifted. A low growl rolled through the morning. Several soldiers stepped backward. Elara turned. Kaelen. His eyes met hers. Don't. The single word stopped him. She walked between the wolves and the soldiers. The villagers gasped. Garrick stared. You think you can control him? No. Elara's voice was steady. I think I can stop people from dying. Kaelen watched her. She had no sword. No armor. No army. Yet she stood there. Alone. The king finally stepped backward. The soldiers lowered their weapons. For one moment, peace seemed possible. Then Garrick disappeared. Elara noticed too late. The cabin door stood open. Her heart stopped. She ran inside. The fireplace still burned. The pup was gone. On the floor lay a torn piece of black cloth. Kaelen entered behind her. His face changed when he saw it. Garrick. The 4 wolves rushed outside. Elara followed. Snow had begun falling again. There were tracks leading toward the mountain pass. Kaelen looked at her. You stay here. No. This is dangerous. He took the pup. Kaelen's jaw tightened. I know. I'm coming. He stared at her.
Then he saw the determination in her eyes. You don't understand what waits beyond the pass. Elara wrapped her cloak around herself. Maybe not. She stepped into the snow. But I understand what happens when someone helpless is left alone. Kaelen said nothing. Then he transformed. 4 black wolves surged into the storm. Elara ran after them. The mountain swallowed them. Wind screamed between the rocks. Visibility fell to almost nothing. Hours passed. Elara's legs weakened. Her fingers became numb. Then Kaelen stopped. A lantern lay half-buried beside a ravine. Garrick's lantern. Elara approached. Below, darkness stretched into the mountain. Then she heard it. A tiny cry. The pup. Alive. But trapped beneath the ice. Elara dropped to her knees. The sound came again. A desperate little cry from beneath the frozen surface. The pup. Kaelen approached the ravine. The ice had cracked across the entire passage. Garrick was trapped on the opposite side, clinging to a narrow ledge. Help me. Elara stared at him. He had stolen the pup. He had lied about her. He had brought armed men to her home. Yet now he was bleeding. His hand slipped. Kaelen growled. The mountain groaned. Elara looked down. The pup was trapped in a narrow pocket beneath the ice. She could reach it. Barely. Elara, no. Kaelen caught her arm. She looked at him. It's alive. The ice will break. Then we have to be quick. She lowered herself onto the ice. It cracked beneath her weight. Kaelen's hand tightened around the rope tied around her waist. Elara crawled forward. The pup cried again. I'm here. Her fingers reached through the opening. The pup licked them. Elara smiled through tears. I've got you. The ice split. Kaelen pulled the rope. Elara grabbed the pup. For one terrifying second, both disappeared beneath the surface. Then Kaelen dragged them back. Elara held the pup against her chest. Its heart hammered against hers. She closed her eyes. The mountain shook again. Garrick screamed. His ledge collapsed. Elara looked up. Without thinking, she reached for him. Kaelen caught her shoulder. He's falling. He grabbed Garrick with one arm. The hunter landed hard against the ice. For several seconds, no one moved. Then Garrick stared at Elara. You saved me. Elara breathed heavily. I couldn't watch you die. Garrick looked down. Something in his face broke. I would have let you die. I know. The mountain trembled. A deep crack opened beneath them. The frozen floor split apart. A silver light rose from below. Kaelen stared. The ice collapsed. They fell into an ancient chamber. Stone walls surrounded them. At the center stood a massive seal. 4 black wolves appeared around Elara. The pup crawled from her arms and stepped toward the symbol. Silver light spread across the floor. Kaelen's face went pale. No. Elara looked at him. What? He stared at the ancient writing. The prophecy. What prophecy? Kaelen swallowed. For centuries, my family believed the royal heir would be protected by the strongest warrior in the kingdom. The silver light grew brighter. But the old words said something else. Elara stepped closer. Kaelen looked directly at her. The true protector would be chosen by compassion. Silence. The pup touched the ancient seal. The entire chamber awakened. Symbols appeared across the walls. Then Garrick saw another mark. A royal crest. His face drained of color. I know that symbol. Kaelen turned. Where? Garrick hesitated. The man who hired me. Kaelen stepped forward. Name him. Garrick closed his eyes. Lord Malrek. Kaelen went still. The nobleman had been one of his father's closest advisors. The man who had helped organize the attack. The man who wanted the throne. Before Kaelen could speak, a distant sound echoed through the mountain.
Drums. Hundreds of them.
Garrick looked toward the entrance. They're here. Kaelen transformed. The 4 black wolves surrounded Elara. Outside the chamber, an army waited beneath the snow. And at its front stood Lord Malrek. The mountain shook beneath the sound of marching feet. Torches appeared through the snow. Hundreds of soldiers moved between the trees. At their center rode Lord Malrek. His armor was dark. His face was calm. Too calm. He dismounted before the ruined shrine. Kaelen. The Alpha King stepped from the ancient chamber. Snow fell across his shoulders. You killed my brother. Malrek smiled. Your brother was weak. Kaelen's eyes hardened. You wanted my throne. I wanted a kingdom strong enough to survive.
No.
Kaelen's voice was quiet. You wanted a kingdom that feared you. Malrek raised his hand. Archers appeared along the ridge. Inside the chamber, Elara held the pup close. The villagers who had followed the armies stood behind the soldiers. Some recognized her. Some lowered their heads. Garrick stepped forward. Stop. Malrek looked at him.
You.
Garrick walked into the open. I lied. The words echoed through the snow. I told the village she stole the pup. Malrek's face darkened. I did not ask for your confession. I know. Garrick turned toward the villagers. I followed her because I wanted the reward. I believed kindness made her weak. He looked at Elara. I was wrong. Malrek drew his sword. Kill him. No soldier moved. Kaelen stepped forward. The 4 black wolves emerged behind him. The villagers stared. Then something unexpected happened. The baker stepped out from the crowd. Then the old blacksmith. Then 2 hunters. Then others. People who had spent years ignoring Elara now stood between her and Malrek's army. The old village healer held a wooden staff. We owe her. Another voice answered. We do. Malrek looked around. His confidence disappeared. Kaelen raised his hand. The wolves moved. The battle erupted. Steel struck steel. Snow exploded beneath running feet. The 4 black wolves moved through the battlefield like shadows, attacking only those who raised weapons against Elara and the pup. Kaelen fought Malrek near the ancient stones. Elara stayed close to the wounded. She wrapped bandages, dragged injured villagers away from the fighting, calmed frightened horses, held the pup beneath her cloak. When a soldier stumbled toward her, she expected violence. Instead, he dropped his sword. I won't fight you. Elara nodded. Then don't. Across the clearing, Kaelen and Malrek collided. Malrek swung. Kaelen blocked. The Alpha King drove him backward. Finally, Malrek fell. His sword disappeared into the snow. Kaelen stood over him. You wanted fear. Malrek looked up. And now? Kaelen glanced toward the villagers. They chose.
Malrek's expression changed. For the first time, he understood. Power had never been about making people kneel. It was about giving them a reason to stand. The battle ended. The snow became quiet. Garrick was taken into custody. Before he was led away, he stopped beside Elara. I am sorry. Elara looked at him. She did not forgive him immediately. Perhaps some wounds needed time. But she nodded. Then become someone who deserves forgiveness. Garrick lowered his head. Weeks later, Kaelen returned to Elara's cabin. The snow had softened. The forest smelled of pine and smoke. The pup slept beside the fireplace. 4 black wolves rested outside. Kaelen stood on the porch. You could come to the fortress. Elara looked around her cabin. Why? Because you saved my family. She smiled faintly. I only fed a hungry animal. Kaelen stepped closer. No. His voice softened. You saw something helpless and decided it deserved kindness. Elara looked at him. What would happen to me there? You would have a place at court. She shook her head. I don't want another place where people decide who I am. Kaelen understood. Then don't. She looked surprised. He continued. Stay here if you wish. The words were simple, but they meant more than any royal promise. You are free. Elara looked toward the 4 wolves. Then toward the pup. Then toward the mountains. For the first time in years, she did not feel like she was waiting for someone to choose her. She had already chosen herself. Months passed. Spring came slowly. Snow melted from the forest. Wildflowers appeared beneath the pines. Word spread across the northern kingdom about the Omega who had protected the royal heir. People began arriving at her cabin. Some brought injured wolves. Some brought orphaned children. Some came simply because they had nowhere else to go. Elara never asked where they came from. She opened the door. She gave them food. She gave them blankets. She gave them a place beside the fire. And every winter evening, when the sun disappeared behind the mountains, 4 enormous black wolves still appeared beyond her fence. The pup was no longer tiny. His legs had grown strong. His silver mark had become brighter. He always entered first. He would place his head against Elara's hand. She would smile. Then she would look at the 4 black guardians waiting outside. Sometimes Kaelen came with them. Sometimes he stayed away for weeks because kingdoms required kings. But he always returned. One evening, Elara sat on the cabin steps beneath falling snow. The grown wolf rested beside her. She remembered the woman she had been 3 winters before. The woman who had walked away from her pack believing rejection was proof that she was unwanted. She looked at the wolves. At the warm light shining through the cabin window. At the footprints surrounding her home. And she finally understood something she had been too hurt to see before. She had not been abandoned because she was worthless. She had been pushed away from a place that could never recognize what she carried inside her. The family she needed had been waiting beyond the forest. Not because she was powerful. Not because she was royal. Not because she had earned some ancient prophecy. But because, on the coldest night of the winter, when everyone else had walked past a helpless creature in the snow, Elara had stopped. She had shared half of what little she had. And sometimes, that was how a life changed. Not with a crown. Not with a sword. Not with a kingdom. But with a small bowl of warm food placed beneath a pine tree for someone who had nothing to give in return. The grown pup lifted his head. Far beyond the trees, a wolf howled. Then another answered. Then 2 more. Elara smiled. She pulled her cloak around the wolf beside her. And beneath the quiet winter sky, for the first time in her life, she no longer wondered where she belonged. She was home.